And I'd like to invite you to come into this moment. So sinking into your chair, taking a deep breath in, and bringing yourself into this moment, away from the rush to log in, away from getting to your work this morning. And sinking into this moment. Perhaps feeling the pressure of the floor underneath your feet. Feeling how the chair that you're sitting in is holding you. It's nothing that you have to do. Allowing yourself to sink into the chair. And noticing if there's any muscles that are already tense from the beginning of the day. And then when you're ready, just opening your eyes, and we'll begin our discussion on the pleasant and the unpleasant. So, as I mentioned previously, the questions, if you have any, to please send them to Michael. And I'm going to begin with a picture of our fellow that we met on the very first day of our presentation, person from another culture who is pierced with needles and has some sticks underneath his flesh, and to most of our Western culture, we would say that this is an unpleasant experience for this man to be going through. Yet, he is quite honored to be participating in this ceremony in his own culture and finds it a pleasant experience. So it does really demonstrate how subjective this situation is that what is pleasant to one is not necessarily pleasant to another, and vice versa. Is unpleasant isn't the same for everybody. We're just bringing awareness to that kind of situation. This week, I invited you at the end of our last presentation to have a look at pleasant and unpleasant. It would be interesting if people had anything to share about those situations as they arose during the week. So, as we have been speaking about for many weeks now, is the definition of mindfulness, beginning with attention, with intentional, moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness of each moment. Non-judgmental in that we don't consider it bad or good. We just notice what is going on. So I'm going to ask you to continue with this particular practice of paying attention on purpose in a particular way. And the particular way that we were paying attention is using the foundational tenets of mindfulness, is actually practicing to notice what is going on for us without judgment, trusting how we feel within ourselves, and patience with what is going on. I'd like to invite you to experience what it feels like in the body and the mind and the emotion. So possibly people have actually looked at pleasant this week in the body and mind and emotion. But just in case people haven't, I'd like to invite you to participate in a brief exercise of looking at pleasant in this moment. So I'd like to invite you to come again into your breath and sinking into your chair. And if you will, closing your eyes and thinking for a moment about someone or something that you love unconditionally, perhaps a small child, perhaps a person or an animal, someone that you love unconditionally and that loves you unconditionally. If you will, for a moment, seeing their eyes, noticing the feeling that arises within you, noticing any sensation in the body, mind, emotion. Just for a moment, allowing this feeling to spread all the way through your body. This feeling of pleasant. And then perhaps asking yourself, what does it feel like in my body, mind, my emotion? Can you notice what it feels like? The chances are you might have felt a warmth in your chest. That sometimes happens with a pleasant sensation. You may have felt the warmth spread throughout your body. You may have felt your heart open somewhat to think of this person or a pet that you love unconditionally, that loves you back unconditionally. You may have felt your muscles relax. These are typically things that arise with the sensation of pleasant. And if you could send Michael anything that came up for you during that exercise or during the week when you practiced it, and have a look at what did happen exactly for you. So this sensation of pleasant actually is associated mostly with the relaxation response. So this sensation of a warmth in the chest, an opening of the heart, and the muscles releasing is a relaxation kind of a response. And it's a response in the body that happens when we are able to regenerate ourselves. And so it's also called repose and repair response. It's a place where we actually come into a relaxation response where the body is able to feel at ease and it's able to mend tissues that are damaged. It's able to do all of its repair work during this time of relaxation. And so what's suggested by the research is that, in fact, a pleasant experience, it doesn't matter how brief that pleasant experience is, even if you look at the sunset or the sunset at night or the sunrise in the morning, briefly, just mindfully looking at this event, mindfully for a few moments. This particular experience, in the face of a lot of unpleasant events, actually does a lot of good for us, is that the pleasant in the midst of unpleasant is helpful. It's a response that's useful, and the research demonstrates that even though we may be under considerable stress and have all kinds of things going on in our lives that are difficult, if we choose to have a few of these pleasant events in the course of a day, it's helpful for helping the body to heal and maintain itself. So a lot of the research suggests that we can actually spend a bit of time with that pleasant event by being mindful of it, by actually noticing it. So by not flying over it and ignoring it, by spending a few moments with it and noticing what's going on in our body, mind, and emotion at the time of pleasant, just becoming aware of it. And then some of the other things we can do to capitalize on these events in our life are to share them with another person and let the other person know what happened in response to a pleasant event. Sharing it, capitalizing on it, being mindful of it. This kind of work for ourselves is helpful in helping the body to mend itself and to repair itself. There's quite a bit of research in this area, so if anyone is interested in that particular research, I can point you to some of the more recent articles that have been done around pleasant. So what happens in the mind and the body in the emotion in response to pleasant? Sometimes there's a feeling that we want to stay with it, that we don't want to let it go, and we don't want to deal with anything else. We want to stay with that. Sometimes there might be a feeling of a clinging to it, is that we really don't want this good time to end. We don't want for this to go away. We want to stay with it despite all odds that it's going to pass through us. And even if we try to hang on to it and cling to it, usually what happens is that the event comes and it goes. It comes and it goes. And no matter how hard we try, we really can't make it stay any longer than any other event in our lives. It's just an event. And so what we're trying to do with the mindfulness work is become an observer, an impartial observer, watching as things come up for us and then they subside. So they come up and they go away. They come and they go. Even if it's pleasant and we want to hang on to it, we usually can't do that. So it's something that arises and goes away and comes to us and then leaves us just as quickly as any other feeling does. So these things pass through our mind, body, emotion on a regular basis. There's no one thing that stays with us for any length of time. And so this positive emotion, as I mentioned, is helpful even in the midst of the huge negative emotion. So it does have some utility for us to hang on to it. Now, the unpleasant. The unpleasant is another story. It's quite different than the pleasant, but nonetheless, the unpleasant is still in the mind, in the body, and in the emotion. What our task is in this mindfulness work is to explore, what about this unpleasant? Where is it in the body? Where is it in the mind? Where is it in the emotion? And what are we doing with it? Are we hanging on to it? Are we replaying it? So I don't know if people actually experienced unpleasant. Usually something happens during anyone's week that could be considered unpleasant. But what we're going to do is do an exercise on unpleasant. And I put up this picture because it kind of reminded me of Halloween, unpleasant. So the skeleton in the middle of your pelvic bone. And so I'm going to ask you for a moment to bring awareness to something unpleasant that's happened in your life. Something that has gone on that has been really unpleasant. Some situation in your life that you really considered to be not pleasant. Maybe something that's happened to you recently. Just thinking for a few moments about what you said in that situation and how you felt in that situation. Maybe you could replay some of the dialogue that went on in that situation. What you said to yourself. What you wish you would have said. And then noticing for a few moments what it feels like in your body. What it feels like in your body, your mind, and your emotion. So chances are it's quite different than it was in pleasant. Chances are you may have experienced some tightness in your shoulders, maybe in your jaw. Maybe there was some tightness in your stomach. Perhaps your face got scrunched up. Sometimes there's a tendency to clench the fists in those situations, holding the muscles really, really tight. Perhaps that might have happened. Likely any warmth that was in the body went away. Sometimes coolness comes over the body. And so those are some of the things that come up when we perceive unpleasant. Those are some of the things that normally arise when someone says, this is unpleasant. And what we want to do is explore is, what is this? What is this? What is going on in the body, in the emotion, in the mind? And what happens as a result of unpleasant? What do we do in response to the unpleasant? What do we do to get rid of the unpleasant? Do we ever hold on to this unpleasant? Do we ever hold on to it and replay it and replay it and replay it? And that's a question that only each of us can answer for ourselves. What do we do with unpleasant? Do we hold on to it? Do we replay it? Do we push it away? So it's an exploration for ourselves, with ourselves, to see what do we do with this feeling. And interestingly, this feeling in the body that arises as a response to unpleasant is the same feeling that arises in the body as a response to stress. So all of the sensations that come up with unpleasant are likely the same things that come up in your body as a result of stress, a feeling of stress, a stressor in the body. There may be this tightening of the muscle. And next week we're going to talk about the physiology of stress, but it's remarkably similar to unpleasant. It's anything that we are, it's a feeling that we perceive as something we don't want to have in our lives, that we want to push away, that we want to not be with, not be present with. And so what I'd like to do right now is to do a listening meditation. And I'd really encourage you to please send in any questions that you have. We're going to begin with a listening meditation. And the listening meditation is taken from the book by Jon Kabat-Zinn called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And this particular reading is from a section called Non-Judging. And so I'd like to invite you to come into your chair and sit quietly, sink into your chair. Close your eyes, if you will, and listen. Focus on the words that I'm reading. It doesn't take long in meditation to discover that part of our mind is constantly evaluating our experiences, comparing them with other experiences, or holding them up against expectations and standards that we create, often out of fear. Fear that I'm not good enough, that bad things will happen, that good things won't last, that other people might hurt me, that I won't get my way, that only I know anything, that I'm the only one who doesn't know anything. We tend to see things through tinted glasses, through the lens of whether something is good for me or bad for me, or whether or not it conforms to my beliefs or my philosophy. If it is good, I like it. If it is bad, I don't like it. If it is neither, I have no feelings about it one way or the other, and may hardly notice it at all. When you dwell in stillness, the judging mind can come through like a foghorn. I don't like the pain in my knee. This is boring. I like this feeling of stillness. I had a good meditation yesterday, but today I'm having a bad meditation. It's not working for me. I'm no good at this. I'm no good. Period. This type of thinking, dominates the mind and weighs it down. It's like carrying around a suitcase full of rocks on your head. It feels good to put it down. Imagine how it might feel to suspend all your judging and instead to let each moment be just as it is, without attempting to evaluate it as good or bad. This would be a true stillness, a true liberation. Meditation means cultivating a non-judging attitude toward what comes up in the mind, come what may. Without it, you are not practicing meditation. That doesn't mean judging won't be going on. Of course it will be, because it is the very nature of the mind to compare and judge and evaluate. When it occurs, we don't try to stop or ignore it any more than we would try to stop any other thoughts that might come through our mind. The tack we take in meditation is simply to witness whatever comes up in the mind or the body, and to recognize it without condemning it or pursuing it, knowing that our judgments are unavoidable and necessarily limiting thoughts about experience. What we are interested in meditation is direct contact with the experience itself, whether it is of an in-breath or an out-breath, a sensation or feeling, a sound, an impulse, a thought, a perception, or a judgment. And we remain attentive to the possibility of getting caught up in judging the judging itself, or in labeling some judgments good and others bad. While our thinking colors all our experience, more often than not, our thoughts tend to be less than completely accurate. Usually, they are merely uninformed, private opinions, reactions and prejudices based on limited knowledge and influenced primarily by our past conditioning. All the same, when not recognized as such and named, our thinking can prevent us from seeing clearly in the present moment. We get caught up in thinking we know what we are seeing and feeling, and in projecting our judgments out onto everything we see off a hairline trigger. Just being familiar with this deeply entrenched pattern and watching it as it happens can lead to greater non-judgmental receptivity and acceptance. A non-judging orientation certainly does not mean that you cease knowing how to act or behave responsibly in society, or that anything anybody does is okay. It simply means that we can act with much greater clarity in our own lives and be more balanced, more effective, and more ethical in our activities. If we know that we are immersed in a stream of unconscious liking and disliking, which screens us from the world and from the basic purity of our own being, the mind states of liking and disliking can take up permanent residency in us, unconsciously feeding addictive behaviors in all domains of life. When we are able to recognize and name the seeds of greediness or craving, however subtle, in the mind's constant wanting and pursuing of the things or results that we like, and the seeds of aversion or hatred in our rejecting or maneuvering to avoid the things we don't like, that stops us for a moment and reminds us that such forces really are at work in our own minds, and to one extent or another almost all of the time. It's no exaggeration to say that they have a chronic, viral-like toxicity that prevents us from seeing things as they actually are and mobilizing our true potential. Okay, so that reading is talking a little bit about what everyone's mind is generally like, is that we look at everything through colored glasses that are colored by our being, how we learned how to think the way we do, liking what we think we like and not liking what we don't like. And so sometimes through looking at the world through these glasses, we can create situations that may or may not be there just through our musings of our own mind. So what I'd like to do at this point is to lead us now into a meditation. But first of all, I'd like to ask Michael if there are any questions that have come up in this presentation so far. Michael?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. I'm here. Yes, there have been a number of questions that have come up about the pleasant experience exercise. We had a few people comment that they experienced a pleasant energy. They felt a full body heat. One of our attendees experienced a glow and a tingling sensation, a gentle sense of euphoria. Very nice. They quite enjoyed it. One of our attendees found that even pleasant feelings do not remain pleasant. A pleasant feeling feels like a jolt of caffeine and then takes a dive. Or is it so pleasant, maybe it's difficult to contain?
Interesting. Interesting questions. I think that probably pleasant and unpleasant, all of those things are temporary. everything that goes through our mind, body, emotion is temporary in nature, so that it comes and it goes. So if we're able to stand back as an impartial observer, just noticing when this comes and when it goes, it is a sensation, feeling, thought, sensation in the body, and noticing actually that the tendency to try and make it last or to like it better than another experience. So it just comes up and it goes. And so the pleasant very much is very similar, or it probably is a relaxation response. So it's a response where the body is able to let go and be at its very best in a pleasant experience, to completely relax. But important to realize that these things, these sensations, these thoughts, they just come and then they go. And unless we make a focused effort on trying to cling on to them, and then once we start to cling or make them longer, we tend to get rid of that pleasant feeling because we're stressing, we're trying to hold on to something, we're trying to make it last longer. So I don't know that there's really an answer. It's more of a comment that the person was making, is that this is what happens. So interesting for people, that person, to notice this is what happens for me, is that when I feel pleasant, I feel regretful when it leaves. So just noticing, what does that feel like in the body? What happens in response to it coming and going?
Mm-hmm. We had a comment from an attendee about the unpleasant experience exercise. She wrote, "I have many unpleasant feelings and I can't turn them off. Do you have any suggestions?"
Okay, so probably the best way to not, like, those unpleasant things that are happening in the mind, body, emotion are there, and becoming aware of the actual sensation itself. So this week I'm going to send out a calendar to people and ask you to notice, what is the sensation? You know, what is this thing that we're labeling as unpleasant? What is it? What is it at the very base level? Exactly what is it? Is it a situation? Is it a person? Is it an event? Is something going on for me? Just noticing. And then becoming aware of the internal dialogue around it. So becoming aware of what we say to ourselves in response to unpleasant. We don't want to try and get rid of the feelings of unpleasant or the situation. What I'd like to invite you to do is to explore the situation with a gentle kindness with yourself. It is not by beating yourself up and by saying I'm doing it wrong, but just a gentle kindness with yourself and looking to see, what is this situation, and then what is my dialogue around it? What emotions come up around it? And then exploring some alternative ways of being with this situation. Am I trying to push the situation away, for example? Am I pushing against it? Does that, what happens in my mind, body when I try to push against it? So with a gentle kindness, looking at these things. So the many unpleasant things that are happening in one's life, noticing, just becoming aware with no particular intention to change it in any way, but just becoming aware of what I say to myself about this, what happens in my body as a result of this, and what is it that I'm trying to do with this situation. So this will likely take another week or more to explore, to see, but with that kind of a technique, see what happens for you by looking at it gently and kindly in a non-judgmental way. So I hope that helps for that question.
Should we take some more questions, Linda?
Yeah, maybe another couple, and then I was going to begin a meditation.
Okay, we had a number of questions about distraction and inability to concentrate. One of our attendees writes, "How do you overcome the inability to concentrate? Distraction is so strong that it overcomes mindfulness for them. Any recommendations on how to counteract distraction?
I think if through the mindfulness is getting an idea about what is distracting and where am I being pulled, and is there anything I can do to change where I'm being pulled to? So just becoming aware of what the distraction is. Where am I going? And can I relax around it? Now, I'm guessing it may be pain and discomfort in the body. And if there is an ability to continue with the deep breathing, if it is pain we're talking about, by continuing with the deep breathing and relaxing around the edges of this pain, or relaxing around the edges of the sensation in the body, and as best as possible, looking at it like sensation and exploring it with a gentle kindness. So not holding it or not trying to push it away, but relaxing around it. And with any distraction, noticing what goes on in the mind, body, emotion with gentle kindness and with a very soft, gentle looking within and just becoming aware as much as possible, relaxing the muscles that are holding and pushing.
Should we take one more question before the next exercise, Linda?
Yes.
We have a very interesting question from one of our attendees who writes, should the letting go happen to both pleasant and unpleasant equally? And I guess she's talking about the concept of attaching or non-attaching. Should we be as quick to try to be unattached to pleasant feelings as to unpleasant ones?
Yeah, that's kind of the way the mindfulness work is just noticing and letting go of the attachment, letting go of the holding and the struggling and the pulling or the pushing. So it's noticing that tendency to, for example, want pleasant to stay and want unpleasant to go. So through the work, if there's a way to allow things to arise and fall away, and as much as possible to be a witness to our experience. So standing back and looking at it through the eyes of an impartial observer, if we can, noticing what it is and how it is we react, how it is we behave in those situations. So becoming an independent person, independent observer, just noticing, just becoming aware, and there's no difference between the two sensations really. So one is pleasant, one is unpleasant, noticing what reactions come up in us. So that is probably, it's called clinging to sensation of any sort, and there's a whole lot of struggle that goes on when we try to cling or push away with any particular experience.
Great. Well, we have more questions, but maybe we'll leave those till the end if we have more time after the exercise, or we can try to answer them next session. I'll leave that to you, Linda. So back to you.
Okay. So what I'd like to do right now is to try a meditation, because we haven't actually done a sitting meditation yet. And so I'd like to invite people to come into their seats, into a comfortable position, and if sitting down is not comfortable, then lying down. And I'm going to ring the bell again like we do in the beginning. And allowing yourself to come into your sitting or lying posture. allowing the breath to drop down all the way down to the bottom of the lungs. As much as possible, and inviting you to deepen the breath and allowing the breath to enter and leave the body. And if it helps, allowing your eyes to close, although you don't have to. Continuing to breathe deeply and slowly and evenly. Imagine that you're sitting beside a body of water, perhaps a stream or a brook. And there are a lot of leaves from the fall floating past you. So each time a thought arises, any thought, each time it comes up, bringing awareness to the content of the thought, and placing the thought on the leaf and allowing it to float away. Without getting involved in it or following it. Just noticing the content of the thoughts, placing it on the leaf, bringing the awareness back to the breath. It might be useful to find a place in your body to watch the breath from. Perhaps in the abdomen, or the back of the nose, or the throat. Noticing the sensation as the breath enters and leaves the body. And each time a thought arises, noticing the content, placing the thought on the leaf, and returning the attention to the breath. Noticing for a moment your mind. Where is your mind? Has your mind followed one of the thoughts? If it has, releasing the thought and returning the attention to the breath. Okay, so what was that exercise like for people? What happened in the mind and the body? If there's time to send Michael a question right now, we could look at some of the questions. Normally, what happens in that exercise, there's a few different responses. Sometimes the mind is busy. Sometimes it's very, very busy. It's very hard to separate the thoughts. Sometimes it's easy to identify a few thoughts and put them onto the leaf, but then one thought will grab you and take you away into a story. Possibly that happened for you. And so what I'd like to invite you to do this coming week is that on the one of the links goes to a sitting meditation, and we're actually at the stage now where we're going to start to practice the sitting meditation. And when we're with the sitting meditation, that's what we're doing. We're actually looking and exploring the thoughts that come up, the sensations that come up, the dialogue that comes up in the body, mind, emotion. So exploring and just noticing through this non-judgmental, gentle kindness with oneself attitude, just becoming aware of. And as best as possible, each time the thoughts come up and try to drag us away into story, we are able to return to the breath. So it takes practice. It takes practice to be able to do this, but it is well worthwhile. So trying to give it a try this particular week. And then in addition to that exercise, I'd like to invite you to identify the stressors in your life and begin to identify your triggers, what things pull you into a stress response really, really quickly, what pushes your buttons, and then to really identify carefully, closely, what goes on in the mind-body as a result of the stressors. Okay, so Michael, are there any questions that have come from that particular exercise that we could?
Not from that particular exercise as of yet. Although we did get a couple of comments just in now. somebody mentioned that they are getting all sorts of body twitches during that exercise. Is that,
Okay.
and they're wondering whether that's normal.
Yeah, that is normal. That's a normal response to breathing deeply, is to get some body twitches, and there's various explanations for it. But generally, taking a deep breath puts the body into relaxation response and allows the release of tension from the various parts of the body. So the twitching is really a good thing. It's a helpful thing, is to allow the twitching to happen and just allow the body to move in whatever way it's helpful for your body to move in that particular response.
And the only other comment we received was that one attendee found it to be a very relaxing experience where their mind was at rest and at peace, and they were focused on the breath and observing their thoughts.
Okay, and so ideally that's a really, I hate to say good as opposed to bad, but ideally that's what we would be aiming for, but we're not really aiming for anything. The purpose of the exercise is simply to notice, so that's nice that that happened. It doesn't always happen, and if it doesn't happen, it's just as valuable to notice when the mind is busy and the body is tense. So those things are just as valuable in training the mind as noticing something that goes well in the body-mind. Is that noticing, is the mind busy? Are my muscles tense? Are things keeping me from going back to the breath? And if the mind is busy, that is valuable to notice that, just to become aware of that particular situation.
Right. We've had some other reactions here. Sorry to interrupt you, Linda. We had somebody who found it very difficult as they were experiencing nausea and dizziness and wondering whether that's a normal reaction.
Well, it would be hard to know what the nausea and the dizziness are from, depending on how deep the breath is. Sometimes taking a deep, deep breath, if you're not used to doing it, will cause a bit of dizziness because you're not used to getting that much oxygen into the body. But just in a gentle, kind way, just maybe exploring that sensation and maybe not taking quite such a deep breath. Perhaps if you can notice what brings that sensation on and explore for yourself what's going on in the body-mind at that particular time, but with a gentle kindness and not trying to make it any particular way. Maybe the breath might have been a bit too deep or something else going on in the body at that point in time.
All right, Linda. Well, if we're done with our presentation for today, I'll close things off. Are we done then, Linda?
Yeah, I think we're done, and I think the homework is on the screen right now. If we could do that for next week, and this week if you could practice the sitting meditation, a little bit of it, as much of it as you can. And then also if you'd like to continue including the body scan or one of the movement exercises, typically the mindfulness program involves yoga as an exercise, the mindful yoga, and I believe there's a series online that you already have related to yoga. So that might be something that people could explore, some of the yoga movements at this point in time in this mindful, gentle way. And so next week we're going to look at stress and the physiology of stress.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Linda. On behalf of Pain BC and the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, I would like to thank you very much for sharing with us the difference between unpleasant and pleasant experiences and the exercise. I found them very helpful, and I hope our attendees did as well. If you haven't already done so, we will be sending out a link for you to register for the remaining 2 parts of this 5-part series, as well as a link to a recording of Part 3. There's also going to be links to the audio downloads and PowerPoint presentations, everything you need to participate in the remainder of the sessions. If you have any questions for Linda about the information we went over today, please send them to me at communications@painbc.ca. I also wanted to for the practitioners in the audience, I wanted to let you know that Pain BC's annual Interdisciplinary Pain Conference is happening November 2nd. All the information about that is on the homepage at painbc.ca. It's ideally suited to nurses, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, physicians, anybody who treats people in pain, counselors as well. So we urge you to check out that promo for our conference, which is at our website. So again, on behalf of CIRPD, Pain BC, and Langara College, thank you so much to Linda, and thank you for attending. We will see you all again next week. Bye-bye.